Man looks in the abyss. There's nothing staring back at him. At that moment, a man finds his character. And that is what keeps him out of the abyss.
I think I understand.
Welcome to Unfvckd. My name is Michael Blevins. I am a rehabilitated cynic. If you're anything like I was, the world seems pretty bleak. This pervasive concept of the world eventually makes you numb. You neutralize the bad and tell yourself that that's how it is. But you also downplay the good and remind yourself that it can't be good for long. My moments of joy became brief and fleeting because they were interrupted by a sense of impending doom or manufactured demise. And this felt okay because it allowed me to contend with the deep states of melancholy that I'm prone to. In fact, it kind of made it all possible. Almost anyone that looks beyond the surface sees this as a coping mechanism, and it's wildly common. My negative attitude I classified as realism. My skepticism became a potent lens that was just pure delusion, and the laws of physics seemed to confirm my suspicions. See, entropy states that everything eventually devolves to chaos. Most philosophy finds the universe to lack meaning, and we are all biological accidents doomed to a life of ignorant bliss, or we are to suffer the truth of reality. I didn't run from my sensations or try to hide, but instead I projected outward some growing dark sphere. For years, I would claim that my feelings were a reflection of reality. Anyone that had a positive disposition was inherently delusional or not awake, and this was one of the only things that actually made me feel good, thinking that I knew something that others didn't. It gave me a sense of purpose, even if I can admit now that it was pretension. What I had a hard time admitting was that I didn't know how to change myself, and that's because I didn't think that I could. Sure, I coached for a living and well over a decade, transforming people both physically and mentally, making them seemingly unrecognizable to their former selves and anybody that knew them. But to me, these were still just superficial outcomes, no different than a new haircut or maybe a new outfit. At any given moment, I would find something that could reinforce my view in human nature, which always ended with an exasperated sigh and a shake of my head in disbelief. I used to say that everything's fucked because it takes no effort to be a critic. I looked at how most industries leverage human behavior, how technology failed on its promise of a utopic future, and especially bemoaned the predominance of people succumbing to their subconscious desires, either being compelled by fear or just captured by complacency. I felt so strongly about this unease in myself that I made a symposium where people flew from all around the world to gather and discuss just how fucked everything was. I called it Fitness is Fucked because I saw a category of professionals that dedicated their lives to physical capability get overshadowed by a TikTok dance that had a promo code for stretch pants. I watched for years as supplements outvalued coaches and gyms became more about lighting than the humans that they produced. We hosted great conversations and I absolutely loved them. They were on nihilism and nature. They felt deep and meaningful. People claimed that their lives were changed and affected, but they were also somewhat pointless, just like the universe that I saw at the time. But then something curious happened. Years of focusing intently on creation, even when it was fueled by spite, became a value that I saw in others. I saw this value and I made a concerted effort to multiply it. And for the first time in my life, I could finally see the value in myself. Saw a sliver of the new world open up, one that wasn't imprisoned by my viewpoint. That hope caught my curiosity and I began to understand that my outlook reflected my life and my life became a project that wasn't an inevitable decay like thermodynamics postulates, but a true nature, which is that consciousness finds a way, that life can find a way, that we are the very part of nature that is aware, and this is something that no science can falsify, nor any religion describe accurately. So welcome to Unfvckd. This is my new podcast where I'll be exploring the systems and institutions, the processes, and the inherited failings of our society. From culture and conditioning to human health and wealth, if it's worth bitching about, it's worth fixing. This will be a byproduct of what I have learned over the past decade. Coaching some of the world's best athletes, actors, and execs, it is living proof that you can change your disposition, your outlook, and your path. So whether you are new here or you have followed along for years, thank you, and I'm looking forward to making the world that is a little more unfucked. So I wanted to record something a little bit more official. I've recorded thousands of hours of podcasts, and what I've realized is that they tend to trap you a very certain way. You know, we did over 250 some odd episodes. We've had over 1 million downloads. All of that is fine and good, but what I recognized and kind of the purpose of this podcast is that I noticed some corrections that needed to be made. And the reason I wanted to make them is because they are very clearly ways that I can benefit from improvement. For instance, in the old podcast, we used to just like hit record and kind of wait for it to like happen, you know, an hour in, but we would drag people through this kind of like onslaught of trying to get our ideas and actions in motion so that we could finally have like a clean and clear conversation. There's something very genuine about that moment when the conversation is really good, or the moments of truth come out in a very articulated and free-flowing way, naturally. But there's also something disingenuous about making people suffer through your, maybe I would put it as like unpracticed intro. And so I wanted this podcast, to address a couple things. And that is first and foremost that the topic that I find most interesting is that behavior can be changed. And when you do change it, you get different outcomes. And that is kind of the whole purpose behind this. That we might describe something or see something in the world, and the feeling collectively is that nobody can do anything about it. And that's inherently the most popular belief. No matter what topic you kind of bring up, it almost feels like not one individual could change that. And the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter if you change it as a whole, because you can change it within yourself. And this is the kind of like, this is the real deep dive that I want to go in from subject to subject. I also wanted to try something new because I do like the genuine part of podcasting, which is a little freeform, much like this, where I don't really know actually like what is going to be said, but I know I'm going to put it into a direction that will be beneficial and maybe valuable to other people. But I also wanted a form of it that was a little bit more dedicated in practice. So the plan is to open up the dialogue with a series that kind of encapsulates my ideas and thoughts on a subject about what is wrong with it and how I can fix it, and then some free form thought. Also on this podcast, I think you are going to see a lot more interviews that are a little bit more dedicated towards a subject and a conversation that has a little bit more rails on it. If you did enjoy the previous podcasts that I've been on, don't worry, there's still some ranting, there's still some stuff to love from the old thing. I can't get rid of my personality completely, it's still embedded there, but I do want to promise people that I'm trying something new because I think it is the way that I will get better at communicating. And that really is the point of all of this, is to communicate ideas and spread them if you think that they're good. So that is inherently the messaging behind this podcast. Some people might see the shift in my tone and think that it's like some kind of appeal to a greater audience. And to some degree that's true, but I would say that it's not, as some would describe, as like selling out. What it really feels like is if you can communicate to more people more accurately your ideas, it actually makes you a greater teacher. And that's really where I've wanted to push in the past couple of years, is accelerating my ability to communicate ideas so people can absorb them better. No matter your opinion, that's kind of my genuine response to that. And yes, I think a bigger audience is better because there's more critique, there's more feedback. It has its downfalls for sure. But I think the promise of becoming better is worth the risk. And that is what I want to do on this podcast. So as a catch up, because I haven't recorded for quite some time and released any kind of information for quite some time, just off the top, I think most people are probably wondering what I've been doing because they've seen some drastic shifts probably in businesses dissolving and new ones starting. But I'll give you a little background as to why I've been quiet. The first thing is that I recognized something that was kind of alarming. I was, like anybody, doom scrolling probably and checking, a post, and immediately the post was, "Rrr," and you know what that feeling is, where you're like, I gotta say my thing and respond. And I remember reading a comment, and I got so like aggravated from the comment that I like felt like responding, and I kind of like stopped in the moment and recognized what was going on, because to be honest, it wasn't even my post. It wasn't anything I had any kind of investment in the idea, other than maybe I agreed or disagreed with the poster. Here's what's weird. I don't even remember what the fucking post was about. I just remember how much it agitated me that I saw the comment. And then I recognized kind of the trapping that I had fallen in, where this projection of the outside world is made and shelled to us to believe that it is the real world. And so we're reacting like viscerally because we think that it's our real life. But it's actually not. I have nothing to do with these people. And I was letting it control my state. And that is where I kind of put my foot down and I backed away, because I talk a lot about controlling your state. I talk endlessly about paying attention. And I got caught into a trap that I knew existed, that I know is just right around the corner of any kind of like search in social media or media. And I fell into it face first like a complete idiot. And the reason why I backed away from commenting and posting is because I had a lot to refine and learn. I had to like step back and see why I was prone to that behavior. I had to ask bigger questions as to like, why am I being drawn into these things? What kinds of things am I not being fulfilled in that makes me leech on to other people's ideas and other people's problems, as opposed to being able to look at my own and deal with them accurately? It's like, the truth is like, we all have our own problems and they're worth dealing with. And many people don't, and instead they like to focus on other people's problems or world problems. I mean, maybe that's the draw towards politics or celebrity or gossip or anything, is because anything that can distract us from the pain of our own kind of existence, I think we're going to fall for that night and day unless we're truly practiced. So a couple years ago that happened, and I kind of made maybe an agreement with myself to back away from arguing or even commenting on subjects that I don't really have anything to do with. What I noticed immediately is that it changed my perception of the world very, very quickly. I stopped looking at things as in if I agree or disagree, and I started looking at things just slightly different. From what I remember that post, and I don't remember exactly, it had to do with something fitnessy, which is the dumbest topic in the world when it comes to getting angry. What I really had to pay attention to was what I was angry about, which is somebody was saying something and getting a reaction from somebody else. And that reaction like lit up a defense mechanism or an offense mechanism. And it really provided kind of a very like clear window, a clear idea that this is where you will go off the rails if you don't control this very simple thing, which is you need to control your reaction to anything. And although we know that, I think everybody knows that this is not news. This is, Stoicism. It's, Zen philosophy too. All of these old teachings will talk about, the importance of your reaction to something, but it's mostly lip service. And what I felt like was that I had a lot to learn, and I wanted to retreat to kind of learn those things. And what I found is that just a couple months went by where I made a kind of like, a very concerted effort to not comment on anything that I thought was ridiculous or call bullshit on something. After only like maybe a couple months, I noticed that I changed what questions I was asking about people that I would normally criticize. And I'll give you a very like real example. People would send me a pretty famous, trainer. You'll know who he is. He's a ridiculous guy. He invented some stuff, and he bounces around doing like seemingly maybe important athletic moves. It looks ridiculous. Like anybody that looks at it can't possibly think that he's doing anything real. He's saying some stuff that sounds sciencey, so I think people believe it. It seems like a total waste of time. What changed was I started to think like, well, maybe he knows something I don't. You know, you'd see people comment on his stuff and how blown away they were by it. And I changed my feeling of being kind of like angry that people were tricked by like a charlatan or a snake oil salesman. And I started to be more curious about what he was getting right. And this became a fundamental shift in how I started to change my viewpoint on a lot of things, is that immediately when I felt criticism, when I felt the need to identify what was wrong with somebody's premise or idea, I stopped, obviously finished my thought because critical feedback is kind of obvious, but what I really leaned into was trying to switch that question to like, instead of caring where they were wrong, trying to figure out where they were right, where they were accurate, where they were successful. What have they done correct that I could learn from? And this idea completely shifted my entire personality. And I don't want to like, it's not trying to bloviate the effect of this concept. It really did change me in I think a better way. Some people might argue differently, but I just started to see something, you know, ridiculous. You take an influencer, a fitness influencer, who I would normally like make fun of. I would still make fun of them in my head, but then I would stop and be like, I wonder what they did to get to this. Like, what actions did they take? Why are they getting good attention? Like, why are people interested in this? And sometimes the answer is not good, right? It's like, well, because people like X and people are dumb. But for the most part, what I started to pick up was I started to get more ideas, actually. Like, criticism ends the conversation. Criticism negates that you have anything to learn because you're too busy calling somebody wrong to figure out that they, like, even if somebody's wrong, they have correct things that they're doing. And so the learning got exponential, actually. Like, it improved so quickly that I just had to kind of double down on it. And then a really funny thing happened is that this like positive take on other people's, you know, bullshit, whether it's on social media or articles or whatever, it started to change my interaction with people. And immediately, and maybe you call this the non-judgmental space, and I'm not hitting on anything new, obviously, because other people have figured this out, but it just changed the day-to-day interactions and how people saw me. And here's what I think is weirdest, is that I think even though I'm a fairly polite person, I think no matter what you're doing, when somebody says something that you don't agree with and you have that critical mind going on in the background that's just like blowing them up about what an idiot they are, they can tell. I think people can people can kind of read your mind. You can't hide everything. You can put on a nice face, but people know. And what changed was when I got rid of the critic about everything, how somebody dresses, whatever, and I came to a space where I was just curious about why somebody is the way they are, the exchanges changed. And I started to get more valuable interactions out of my relationships that were good already, and then exponentially better relationships out of ones that I wouldn't normally foster. It also led to a lot of truth, because instead of trying to hide my criticism, if criticism started or I started to notice something that took away from that kind of like good feeling that I got from curiosity, you know, if anybody kind of went against that, it became an immediate removal of, you know, I don't want that person in my space. So it became kind of a clear boundary to draw based off of, this person is making me feel a certain way, and I'm actually open to it because I've removed the veneer that I extended to other people before. There was actually probably a false perception. So the veil lifted kind of both ways, and people that I had dealt with, been friends with, became almost intolerable. And other people that would normally I would shy away from because of pretension or some kind of a judgment on them, I became open to closer relationships with people that I wouldn't normally. And it shifted so drastically that I think it's worth mentioning here on the first episode, because I think it's foundational principle for what I try to practice today. And that is why kind of the Unfucked podcast theme is there. Because for years we just had this like, fuck this, fuck that, this is bad, this is like, politics sucks. We ranted and raved like a bunch of kind of like bitchy teenagers that don't, you know, that aren't willing to change anything. They're just willing to like say that it's stupid. You know, I don't like that. And then they go back in their room and sulk and listen to music and, I don't know, post passive aggressive shit towards the thing to the person that they can't actually make the statement to. That core kind of like experience in the past couple of years led to a couple things, a couple shifts, which was, you know, the creation of a new company, Erin's company that she designed, Alqemis. It opened up a gateway that I didn't know was possible. You know, I had thought about coaching in the gym space and maybe, you know, movie stuff, other projects that we've done, sports. That was kind of the limitation. And what happened with this opening and this kind of like ability to see differently is that we got into a new line of work that's actually pretty fascinating. We got pulled on into, you know, one of the biggest commodity traders in the world to come on and evaluate how they were performing and how they could get better. And this lasted, you know, this project lasted a year. And it was insanely insightful because it was so new and so different, and the communication style was so different, and the application and the implementation of things that might normally be easy for people were now constrained by a cultural perception of what fitness was in a different industry that we don't really understand and have taken a long time to try to understand. And this changed our practice fundamentally. It brought in new data. We got, you know, new education on how to use testing and biometrics, and fundamentally made us better. I mean, it was absolutely hard, arduous work, and I will go into kind of like the details later. But as an example of where like this baseline shift, I can connect the dots exactly about changing my attitude towards criticism into kind of like creative curiosity, and how that opened to the gate to kind of a new business model and a new way to kind of like help people with genuine kind of fitness and health and well-being that we might not ever be open to. Because normally if somebody was like, you want to do performance for a day trader? I'd be like, fuck no, those guys are fucking nerds. Like what? I want to, you know, I was like other trainers. I want to be on the front line of the best performers in the world. And that is such garbage and bullshit and postulating that I think I wouldn't have seen the possibility unless I had changed fundamentally. So that was the big shift I wanted to cover in this first episode in kind of a more genuine way, open up the dialogue for this. Through this channel, the first things that I kind of want to go over are the big subjects. So we will cover fitness as actually multiple episodes. I will bring on guests and we will have conversations geared towards this subject of unfucking things. And I hope that this new format is interesting to you. I hope this subject is. I hope that I can bring kind of something new, maybe some of the old that we're known for, but also something very fresh and innovative, and something that will be very, very valuable if you do tune in. So thank you guys very much for listening so far. I really look forward to like putting out these episodes and capturing some of my ideas that have gone bouncing around my head for the last 2 years. And we'll see you soon.